I can almost see Bill now as he finishes up chapter 2, and again reviewing what he's done up to this point. And he says, I've shown them what the problem is in the doctor's opinion. I've given them an example of a guy that had that problem in my story. I've given them the solution to that problem in chapter 2. But then he probably says they're not going to like that solution any better than I liked it. Remember how Bill was aghast when Ebbie came to see him. Bill didn't like the idea of this spiritual experience. He didn't like the idea of this God thing, period. And he probably said to himself, most of the people that I'm writing this book to are going to have the same attitude that I did. And he said, I think what I better do is tell them a little more about alcoholism so they'll know exactly what's going to happen to them if they don't have this vital spiritual experience. And he wrote chapter 3 and he called it More About Alcoholism. And in this chapter he talks about one thing and one thing only, period. Step 2 said we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, if we have to be restored to sanity, that indicates then we must be insane. And what this chapter talks about is that insanity or that insane condition that we must be restored from. Now, many people when they come to AA are highly offended when you talk to them about insanity. They say, oh, no, don't tell me I'm crazy or insane. Oh, yeah, I do some stupid things when I'm drinking. But when I'm sober, I'm much like other people. Other people, when they come to AA, they say, well, I don't have any trouble with that insanity because I remember all the crazy, stupid things I did while drinking. But in either case, they're referring to the things we do while drinking. That's not insanity. The things that you and I do when we're drunk, that's caused by a mind filled with alcohol. And alcohol lowers the inhibitions. And if your mind is filled with something that lowers the inhibitions, look out. You're going to do some pretty crazy, stupid things, all right. But that's not insanity. That's caused by alcohol itself. In order for me to really see this insanity, I again had to go back to the dictionary and look up the word sanity or sane. And the dictionary defines sanity or saneness as wholeness of mind or completeness of mind. If your mind is whole, if your mind is complete, that means you can see the truth about everything around you. If you can see the truth about everything around you, you normally make decisions and take actions based upon the truth, and life is usually pretty good. An insane mind is one that is less than whole, that cannot always see the truth, and sometimes makes decisions based upon something that isn't true, and sure enough, life usually gets fouled up. Insanity does not mean that you're crazy. If you're crazy, that means you've lost more than half your marbles. And you got to be locked up somewhere to protect you and society from you. Insanity doesn't mean that you've lost more than half your marbles. It just means your mind is not completely whole. I think one of the best ways to illustrate it is this. Let's take a pie and put it out here in front of me, and let's cut it into 10 pieces. Now you come along and I give you a piece of my pie. My pie is now less than whole, but I've still got 90% of it. Somebody else comes along and I give them a piece of pie. My pie is now more or less than whole, but I've still got 80% of it. Insanity does not mean you're all gone. It just means you're not quite all here. And when it comes to alcohol, it seems as though from time to time we're not quite all here. Because from time to time we can't see the truth about alcohol. And we make a decision based upon a lie, and then we run into the truth. Now this whole chapter is set up to where it's going to give us some examples of the insanity of alcoholism. And we're going to look into the mind of a guy that's 30 years old. We're going to look into the mind of a guy that's named Jim. We're going to look into the mind of a guy that's named Fred. And in all cases, we're looking into a mind which is completely free of alcohol, stone cold sober. And we're going to see if they can see the truth about it or if they cannot see the truth about it. If they can see the truth, they're sane. If they can't, they're insane. Let's do the first page on page 30, and then we'll go ahead and have lunch.
More about alcoholism. This could be called More Truth About Alcoholism. See, I do better when I know better. In this chapter, I've always heard all my life, if you know the truth will set you free. Well, if I'm not free, it's because I don't know the truth. So this is more truth about alcoholism. And most of us have been unwilling to admit that we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think that he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it's not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts that we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we're like other people presently maybe has to be smashed.
Now be very careful here. Here's Bill again using a series of words that all mean the same thing. And if you aren't careful, you'll think he's talking about something different. In the first paragraph, he said, the idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Now remember, an obsession of the mind is an idea that is so strong, it overcomes all ideas to the contrary. The obsession of the mind that we have, that someday we will control and enjoy our drinking, is so great that it makes us believe something that is not true. And we believe we can drink, and sure enough, we take a drink based upon that idea. So the word obsession means to believe a lie also in the context of the book. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. We all know what an illusionist is. An illusionist is a magician, and a good magician can stand in front of you and with sleight of hand and a few props can make you believe something that is not true. So the word illusion also means to believe a lie or believe something that isn't true. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. Now there's another word, delusion, which means exactly the same thing. If you've deluded yourself, you've come to believe something that is not true. So there's 4 words here you might see Bill use. Illusion, delusion, obsession, or insanity. And in all 4 cases, they mean to believe something that is not true or a mind that is less than whole. Right after we have lunch, we'll look at the lie that these examples in the book believe just before they take a drink. Are they sane or are they insane? See you back in here at 1:30, okay?
Coy, I'm an alcoholic. There's a car out in the parking lot with a license number GTO 7069 387 236H. Your car's okay, but the license tag's blocking the driveway. Everybody have a good lunch? Everybody sleepy? It's going to be a long afternoon, so bear with us.
We are going to go back and do just a little bit of house cleaning here. We've put a little picture up here on the screen to represent what we were really looking at in chapter 2. Before we go any further with chapter 3, let's just look at this picture for just a moment. What is the solution? And of course, we were told on the first page of chapter 2 that the solution for those of us who are powerless, the solution will lie within power. And on that page it talked about 2 powers, the power of the fellowship and the power of the common solution, which is the vital spiritual experience. So what we've attempted to do on the left-hand side of that sheet is show the power of the fellowship, where the older members, through sharing their experience, strength, and hope with a new member, provides enough strength for that new member to be able to stay sober for a period of time. And it's a two-way street. As the older members support the new member, they draw strength from that also. Now, it would be almost impossible to be in AA today for very long and not begin to believe in some kind of power working within and through this fellowship. When you hear countless tens and then hundreds of people say that it's only by the grace of God, or because of a power greater than I am, or because of God as I understand Him, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink today, or X number of days, weeks, months, years, whatever. You just can't hardly hear that over and over and over again and see the examples in front of your eyes and not begin to believe some kind of power must be working within this fellowship. And the instant the newcomer begins to believe that, then that opens the mind up, and he becomes willing. And upon an investigation, if he's real lucky and got a good sponsor, he'll find this simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then as the newcomer takes the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, it revolutionizes their whole attitude toward life, toward the dwellers, and toward God's universe. Or we have a personality change, or a spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it, sufficient to recover from alcoholism. Then when we do that, we become an older member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Then we can go back to the left-hand side of the sheet and support the next newcomer that comes in. Now you'll notice we're basing older membership not on how long you've been sober, but on whether or not you've had the vital spiritual experience. You know, there was a time back in the beginning of AA where everybody worked the steps. There just wasn't any doubt about that at all. And a newcomer came in, they grabbed onto them immediately, they started them right into the program, and they worked the steps, and they depended upon the vital spiritual experience or spirituality for their recovery. And in those days, if the newcomer didn't want to work the steps, they said, well, we can't help you because that's all we have to offer to you. And they would tell them, maybe you ought to go back and drink some more until you become willing to work the steps. In the beginning, they didn't have the fellowship to depend upon. Because remember, as late as 1939, there was only 100 of us in this little fellowship. And there's no way that we could go to 90 meetings in 90 days. They didn't have that many meetings to go to. And they depended upon spirituality. But somewhere, as we've said before, they began to lay the book to the side and start staying sober on the strength of the fellowship as it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the instant they did that, they began to measure then success by length of sobriety rather than quality of sobriety. And we went from a living program that changed our lives to a non-drinking program that just helped us stay sober. And we began to measure success by the length of that sobriety. Now you can look around you today in AA, and you see all kinds of people in this fellowship. You see some people that's only been in here 4, 5, 6 months. They were real lucky. They had a good sponsor. They got right into the steps. They worked the program. They've had a spiritual experience, and they've changed entirely, and they are a delight to behold. God, you love to be around them. They're always laughing and cutting up and having fun. They're always helping other people and doing everything they can for AA, and they've only been sober just a few months. Then you see some that's been in here 8, 10, 12 years. They've treated it like a cafeteria. They've taken part of the steps, and they haven't taken part of the steps. They're better than what they used to be, but you never know what kind of shape they're going to be in when you run into them. One day they're up, the next day they're down, and you're never quite sure what you're going to see when you find them. Then you have some that's been around 16, 18, 20 years. Never worked a step. Damn proud of it. And they're the ones that say, if you want what we've got, then you're willing to go to any damn lengths to get it. Always bitching and griping and raising hell about everything around them. You know, some of those guys you'd like to buy them a drink. You know damn good and well they'd feel better. Even though they've been sober a long time, the quality of the sobriety is pretty low. So we're really basing the length of our older member on the quality of the sobriety rather than the length of the sobriety. And I think that's quite easily brought out as we look at chapter 2 and see what's really necessary for recovery. Now then, let's go back to chapter 3 again, and let's go back to page 32. And just before lunch, we were talking about the insanity, the illusion, the delusion, the obsession of the mind, the lie that we believe just before we drink. And let's look in the mind of the man of 30 just before he got drunk.
On page 32, said a man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the mornings after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. And once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man. He remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. Now, he tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital in the meantime. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found that he could not. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. Now, this case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here's a man who at 55 years found that he was just where he left off at 30. We've seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we're in a short time as bad as ever. Now, if we're planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservations of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we'll be immune to alcohol.
You know, there's a funny thing about the truth. The truth is the truth, and it never changes. It's always standing right there. And if you believe anything other than the truth, and you make a decision and take action based upon a lie, sooner or later you're going to run into the truth. And the truth's just going to cut your head off every time. You know, we know the truth to be this: once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. We've never seen one single case where we ever been able to go back and drink like normal people can drink. That is the truth. Now, to believe anything other than that is to believe a lie. This guy believed that after being sober for 25 years, he could now drink like other people. And based upon that disbelief, or based on that belief, which is not the truth, he took a drink, triggered the allergy, couldn't stop drinking, and within 4 years he's dead. Now, is his real problem, though, the fact that he's allergic to alcohol, or that he has a form of insanity that tells him that it's okay to drink alcohol after 25 years of sobriety? The real problem, the alcoholic, centers in the mind, telling us we can drink, rather than the body that ensures that we can't drink. Just before he took that first drink, just before he got out the carpet slippers and the bottle, his mind said that after being sober 25 years, it's okay to drink. Based on that lie, or that obsession, or that illusion, or that delusion, he took the first drink, and then he couldn't stop drinking. So his real problem centered in his mind, telling him he could drink, rather than the body that ensures that he can't. Let's go to page 34. Second paragraph. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he's already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. How then should we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. For obviously this is the crux of the problem. Now always remember, just prior to relapsing into drinking, the mind is stone cold sober. There's no alcohol in it whatsoever. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. Now, Joe loves old Jim, so we'll let Joe talk about Jim. He gets screwed up with him once in a while. Let's see what he can do with him today, Joe.
I like old Jim. He's my kind of drunk. Good man. I like him. We're going to look into the mind of old Jim and see what the mental states he has prior to taking a drink in a bit. But our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him.
He's normal alcoholic, isn't he?
He's an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. Now, he did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the treatment center, on leaving the asylum, it's the same thing, they just charge a little more for the treatment center these days.
They used to lock you up and keep you in them. Today they'll let you out of them. That's about the only difference in them.
He came into contact with us. Now, we told him what we knew of alcoholism.
They told him about step 1.
And the answer we had found.
They told him about step 2.
Now, he made a beginning.
A little later on, we're going to see in the book where step 3 is but a beginning. So apparently Jim took steps 1, 2, and 3, and immediately things started getting better for him.
Yeah. After he took steps 1, 2, and 3, his family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for a business he'd lost through drinking, and all went well for a time. But he failed to enlarge his spiritual life.
And we're going to find the only way we can enlarge on step 3 is through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Jim didn't take any of those, just 1, 2, and 3, period.
Now, to his consternation, he found himself drunk a half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what happened.
Now, these are good AA members. Jim got drunk 6 times in a row. And every time they went over there and very carefully reviewed with him what had happened to him. You get drunk 6 times in a row today, they're probably not going to have anything to do with you at all. These were good AA members.
Now, he agreed he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition. Now, he knew he faced another trip to the treatment center if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had deep affection. Yet he got drunk again.
Now, they're getting a little tired of Jim now. They say, my God, Jim, this is 7 times you've been drunk. Let's don't do this anymore. Let's sit down here and figure out exactly what's going on in your life. We ask him to tell us exactly how it happened. Now, we're going to see when Jim goes from sanity to insanity, from normal to abnormal thinking. Let's look in his mind.
He said, I came to work on Tuesday morning.
Now, we read this book for years before we saw that. I came to work on Tuesday morning. Where was he all day Monday? We alcoholics are bad about Mondays. We tend to take 3-day weekends quite often.
He said, I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned.
Well, that's probably normal thinking. You know, I think any of us that had to be a salesman for a concern that we once owned, we'd probably be a little bit irritated by that. I don't think that's insanity. That's probably normal thinking.
He said, I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious.
The boss probably said, say, Jim, by the way, where were you all day yesterday? Nothing real serious, just enough to get us a little irritated.
Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car.
Now, apparently this guy is a car salesman. He wants to get away from the shop a little while. He's a little bit irritated with the boss. What would be more normal than to drive out into the country and see somebody he already knows to try to sell a car to him? Normal, sane thinking for an alcoholic car salesman.
On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I'd get a sandwich.
What's more normal than if you're hungry to want to get a sandwich? And the fact that this roadside place has a bar is beside the point anyhow, because we have no intention of drinking. We're just hungry. We're going to go in there and get us a sandwich. Normal, sane thinking for an alcoholic car salesman.
He said, I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place.
I told you.
I get it mixed up. That section of the mind's still there, which was familiar, for I've been going to it for years. I'd eaten there many times during the months I was sober.
We're not going in there to drink. We're going in there to get us a sandwich, and we might find another customer while we're in there. This place is familiar to us. We've been there many times during the months we're sober. Normal, sane thinking for an alcoholic car salesman.
So I sat down at the table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk.
What's more normal than if you're hungry? To sit down at a table and order a sandwich and a glass of milk. Normal, sane thinking for an alcoholic car salesman.
Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk.
Now, if you're hungry enough, there's nothing wrong with 2 sandwiches and 2 glasses of milk. Unless you're a member of Overeaters Anonymous, you might then look at it very carefully. But for an alcoholic car salesman, this is normal, sane thinking. 2 sandwiches and 2 glasses of milk. But now then, the squiggly writing starts.
And it says suddenly. That means right now. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I would put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach.
That's absolute insanity. For this guy to believe that he can take whiskey and mix it with milk and it won't hurt him on a full stomach. Now, based on this insane idea, based upon this lie, he makes a decision and takes some action. Let's see where he goes from here.
He said, I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. Now, I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart, but felt reassured that I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach.
Now then, we've got it inside ourselves. The physical allergy begin to take over. The phenomenon of craving starts to develop. And now then, we can't stop.
The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. And each time he's doing this, he's running 2 drinks. He's running the whiskey and he's running the milk. It's terrible. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was a threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense and mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. Now, he had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. He had all reasons for not drinking, for easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if he only mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of a portion of the ability to think straight be called anything else?
Definition for insanity is a lack of proportion or the lack of the ability to think straight about alcohol. How could it be called anything else? Now, is Jim's problem the fact that he has a physical allergy to alcohol? Or that he has a form of insanity that tells him it's okay to drink alcohol mixed with milk on a full stomach? The real problem, the alcoholic, centers in the mind, telling us we can drink, rather than in the body that ensures that we can't drink. Now, you may think this is an extreme case. To us, it's not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always a curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. The next day we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened. Let's go to the last paragraph on page 37. Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. Now, I don't understand this guy at all, but I can see him out here on the interstate waiting for a big truck to come down through there, jumps out in front of it, spins around 2 or 3 times, sees how close it can come to hitting him without actually hitting him. For some reason, he gets a thrill out of it. I don't understand it, but I can see him doing it. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. People say, hey, Jack, you better quit doing that. You're going to get hurt. He doesn't pay any attention to them. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he's slightly injured several times in succession. He's getting a little older now. He can't move as fast. They begin to hit him once in a while. Nothing serious. He just kind of bounces off of them.
Fender benders.
Now, you would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. But presently he's hit again. This time has a fractured skull. Now, he got hurt pretty bad this time. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He gets hurt bad again. Now he sings their national anthem. He tells you he decided to stop jaywalking for good. He said, man, I'm through with that jaywalking. I'm tired of these fractured skulls, broken legs, etc. I'll never do that again as long as I live. But in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. On through the years, his conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. He's just so beat up now he can't hold a job. His wife gets a divorce. She started supporting him, the kids, hospital bills, and everything else, and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head, not his body, his head. He shuts himself up in a treatment center, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? Now, you may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we've been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? Now, this insanity we're dealing with here right now is simply our attitude, our ideas, our thinking toward alcohol. Now, we may be sane in all the other areas of our life, but we're looking toward alcohol and alcohol only. Now, a few years later, I realized I wasn't too swift in a hell of a lot of areas when I got to AA. But the one I'm looking at right now is my attitude toward alcohol. Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms. We've not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We've not lost everything in life through drinking. We certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. And I remember the day that I told them that too. Just almost those same words.
Kiss my what, did you say?
Now that may be true of certain non-alcoholic people, who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. We've already talked about that heavy drinker. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize. To smash home upon our alcoholic readers that has been revealed to us out of bitter experience, let us take another illustration. You know, I think what the book's been saying here the last couple of paragraphs is so appropriate today. Many people are coming to AA today because of education before they have to lose everything. Sometimes people come in here and they're still married. Once in a while somebody will come in and they still got a job. Believe it or not, I saw one come in last week that had an automobile. And we start talking about insanity, they say, man, how can I be insane? Look here, I've got everything. I haven't lost any of this stuff. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about one thing and one thing only. Can we or can we not see the truth about alcohol? If we can see the truth, we're sane. If we can't, we're insane. We're going to look at one more guy, Fred. He's one of these high-bottom drunks. He's one of these guys that never lost anything because of his drinking. And he's a guy that gets drunk when he's feeling on top of the world. You know, Jim vaguely sensed he wasn't being any too smart, and Jim didn't feel too good. Old Fred gets drunk without even thinking about anything, and he's feeling great. Seems like we alcoholics, we drink to feel better when we feel bad, but we drink to feel better when we feel good also. Let's look at old Fred for just a moment.
Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home. is happily married and the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it's Fred. To all appearances, he's a stable, well-balanced individual, yet he's alcoholic. We have a Fred here today, by the way, from Canada right there. He said his name was in the big book. Now, we first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he'd gone to recover from a bad case of the jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Now, far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves.
We see lots of nerve resters in AA today, just like old Fred is.
The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days he was depressed about his condition. Now, he made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so in spite of his character and standing. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic.
He would not take step one.
Much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem.
If you can't take one, you can't take two.
Now, we told him what we knew of alcoholism.
They told him about steps 1 and 2.
And he was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms.
He said, I'm just a little bit alcoholic. Yeah. Borderline case.
But he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that his humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he has acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. Now, we heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told that he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. Well, let him tell you about it. He said, I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. And I rather appreciated your ideas about the settled insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I'd learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, and that I'd been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men had failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident. That would only be a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. He's deluding himself, isn't he? In this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks, and I began to wonder if I'd not been making too hard a work with a simple matter. We believe that old Fred started to get drunk right here. His mind began to play with him. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I'd been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there's nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew that my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Everything was going real well for Fred. He was on top of the world, making plenty of money, business deal come off well. Everything's great in Fred's life.
He said, I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails and go back to the hospital. Now, that's the truth. There's no way, though, he could drink on the truth. His mind simply said it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. Absolute insanity. Now, based on this insane idea, he makes a decision and takes some action. I ordered a cocktail in my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. We've got it inside ourselves now. The physical allergy takes over, and now then we can't stop. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed, so I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxicab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. Now, is Fred's real problem the fact that he has a physical allergy to alcohol, but he has a form of insanity that tells him it's okay to drink alcohol? The real problem centers in the mind rather than in the body. You know, I think it's the responsibility of we older members of AA to take every newcomer and take them to this chapter 3 in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous and explain to them what this insanity really is. It is not the crazy, stupid things we do when drunk. It's the insane idea that it's going to be okay to drink just before we take a drink. And left on our own resources, that seems to always come back to us, and we really believe we can drink. Hell, Fred didn't even think of the consequences at all. Jim vaguely sensed he wasn't been any too smart. Fred didn't even sense that. Page 43, last paragraph, once more.
The story about the man of 30 and the story about Jim and the story about the jaywalker and the story about Fred, all of those stories there are to confirm in what this last paragraph says. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. And from now on in this book is going to tell us many, many times and going to show us that you can't heal a sick mind with a sick mind. We can't think our way out of it. Our defense must come from a higher power, or God as we understand it.
You'll notice also in that last paragraph, he said the alcoholic at certain times. He didn't say the practicing alcoholic. He just said the alcoholic. And that means to me today that this idea to drink can come back to me today just as well as it could somebody that's only been sober a week or a month or 6 months. At certain times, for every one of us, we're not going to have any defense against the first drink. Our defense must come from a higher power.